Okay. So these are called quadratic functions. The reason they're called quadratic functions is because they have a squared term. So ax squared is what we call the quadratic term, bx is what we call the linear term, and c is the constant. And it doesn't matter if it has a y or an f of x. They're called quadratic functions. And their graph is going to be a parabola. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to learn everything that we need to find in order to graph a parabola. So the first thing I want to ask you is, what is a y-intercept? What is a y-intercept? It's where the line, or in our case, the graph crosses the y-axis. So you guys, it doesn't matter. It doesn't just have to be a line. It just needs to be a graph. So we have a lot of different functions. They all have a y-intercept. That is where the graph crosses the y-axis. So the first thing we're going to learn is how to find the y-intercept. So the first thing you need to do is you have to define a, b, and c. A is always in front of x squared, the quadratic term. B is always the coefficient of the linear term, and then c is the constant. And then to find the y-intercept, you plug in 0 in for x and you solve for y. Basically, the y-intercept is a point, 0, c. So you plug in 0, you will always find the y-intercept. It's always 0, c. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find that y-intercept. And then we're going to find the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry is, it cuts the parabola in half, and it is a line. So you always write x equals the opposite of b over 2a. This doesn't mean negative b. You say the opposite of b, because a letter can't be negative. So it's the opposite of b over 2a. So if b is negative 3, you would write the opposite of negative 3, which would be positive 3. Again, the axis of symmetry is a line, and it's going to cut the parabola in half. The parabola is our type of graph. So like we have lines and we have parabolas. So a quadratic function is a parabola. So it's going to look like a U, okay? It's either going to open up, down. Later this year, we'll have them open sideways. But for right now, they only open up or down. Okay? Now, we're going to use the axis of symmetry to find the vertex. So we use the axis of symmetry to find the vertex. Okay, again, so if your axis of symmetry is 3, you would plug 3 in. So if this was x equals 3, this would be 3. You plug it into the equation and you get an answer, and that's the answer there. Okay, so now you have this vertex. You have a y-intercept, you have a vertex, you have an axis of symmetry. The vertex tells us if it's going to be opens up or down, and I should say A tells us if it opens up or down, and A tells us if our vertex is the maximum or minimum. Okay, so let me move it up a little bit. There we go. So if A is negative, our vertex is the maximum value, and our parabola opens down. So A tells us a lot of information. So again, if A is negative, then our vertex is the maximum point or the maximum value, and it opens down. If the vertex is positive, if A is positive, it's the minimum value, and the parabola opens up. So A tells us a lot of information, and so you just need to remember it.